mental liar. Narahari Thakur's family was the pride of the Vaishnavas. By their influence, all the people in Srikhand became Vaishnavas. The entire village turned into a branch of the desire tree of love of God. Since the time of Lord Gaurachandra, Srikhand has been the preaching centre for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. One day, Sri Nityananda Prabhu came to Srikhand and asked Narahari, "All right, we know who you are, so where is the honey?" You know what that means?
No.
So Lord Nityananda is in the mood of Balaram. And in the mood of Balaram, he likes honey, he likes Virudi beverage. So he knows who Narahari is in Krishna Lila. Alright, we know who you are, so where's the honey? By his mystic power, Narahari turned a pot of water into super sweet honey for the Lord's pleasure. Narahari serves Lord Shyamasundar in Vrajalila as Madhumati, so Madhu means honey. Prana Saki, who supplies mouth-watering honey for Radha and Tara, and their dear ones. Narahari Sarkar's books, Padakalpataru and Krishna Bhajanamrita, include wonderful songs praising Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Sri Lochandas Thakur and many others were disciples of Narahari Sarkar Thakur. Though not accessible, his samadhi is in Radhakund. So this book, Krishna Bhajanamrita, is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he addresses some very important points concerning the position of the spiritual master and the disciple, particularly if the spiritual master has some difficulty, and he gives very complete directions on that. So, Shri Narayana Sarkar Thakur ki
Jai.
Srimad, Volume 6, Preaching in America, Part 1. Prabhupada had created a sensation, and within a few hours, Chicago's radio and TV stations were talking of the new conference, sort of the news conference, concentrating almost entirely on his comments about women. A woman alderman scheduled to visit Prabhupada phoned to say that she was cancelling because of Prabhupada's expressed attitudes towards women. The TV station phoned and requested to come over that evening to do an interview. Well, the Chicago news reporters wrote their stories for the evening and morning editions. Prabhupada's comments were further picked up by United Press International and Associated Press wire services. Srila Prabhupada had wanted to reach the public with his Krishna conscious message, and therefore he had arrived in Chicago with the specific idea of broadcasting his solution to crime. But now he had hit on a topic that was attracting far more attention. He had had the boldness to assert, in the midst of America's predominant movement of women's liberation, women's real place in society. The devotees were excited by the controversy and were eager to understand the Krishna consciousness philosophy more deeply and to present it exactly. They complained that none of the reporters had delved deeply or allowed Prabhupada to express his ideas of spiritual equality. Yet when Prabhupada heard that evening that he had touched off so much media response, he was amused. He was ready to tell them more. Why only the women should become pregnant, he said, reiterating his point before the small group of devotees in his room. The man goes away and she has to take care of the children and beg from the government. Is that independence? So nowadays we see that men can become pregnant, so this is equality. Actually, anyway. So Prabhupada's making his point here about independence. Devotee, then independence has become conception. I do not want to have a child. Prabhupada, that means you commit another sinful activity, you will be punished. Devotee, Srila Prabhupada, the whole civilization, American Western civilization, is now bewildered by this theory of women's liberation. Prabhupada, but how they will be liberated? On this point, First of all, let me know. Anyway, I'm not speaking of my experience. When we speak from the Shastra. Women's dependence is described in Manu Samhita just like Queen Kunti. She is not an ordinary woman. She was learned and exalted. Prana. This is one point. In our devotional line, there are spiritual leaders who have been women, such as Kunti. But therefore I say that Kunti remained dependent on her sons. That is my proposition. Her sons were banished, but when they went to the forest, she followed, because she thought, I'm a widow, I am dependent on my sons, so wherever they remain, I shall remain. So this is a step of quality, actually, which Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita, in Chastity. Similarly, Sita, the wife of Lord Ramachandra, was requested by his father to go to the forest, not Sita, but she preferred to go with her husband. When her husband said, you are not banished, you stay at home, she said, no, I'm dependent on you, wherever you go, I must go. This is Vedic culture. Should go Of course, what gets it's a bad name is the abuse of such things. Because the man is supposed to give protection, and he's supposed to be spiritual head of the family as well. But then if the men are not actually doing their job, then why should the women become dependent on the men? This is also what Prabhupada is speaking very clearly. So because men are unqualified and the women aren't finding that they can be dependent on them, and then the liberation that Prabhupada is talking about is a spiritual liberation. Of course, this is a subject we can talk quite a lot about deeply. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 From Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, entitled Workshop-Based Teachings, text number 25. Mato, Api, Anantat, Parata, Parasmat, Matopi Anantat, Parata, Parasmat, Swarga Pavarga Dipatir, Na, Kinchit, Swarga Pavarga Dipatir, Na Kinchit,
Varga Pavarga Dipatir Nakinchit
Yesham,
Kim
Syat, Itarena, Tesham, Yesham Kim Syat, Itarena, Tesham,
Kim Syad Itarena Tesham
Akinchanana, Mai, Bhaktibhajam, Akinchananam, Mai, Bhaktibhajam, Matopyanam Tat Parata Parasmat, Matopyanam Tat Parata Parasmat, Swarga Pavarga Dipatir Nakinchit, Swarga Pavarga Dipatir Nakinchit, Yesham Kimusha Tarena Tesham, Yesham Kimusha Tarena Tesham, Akinchananam Mai Bhaktibhajam, Akinchananam Mai Bhaktibhajam, Tat Parata Parasmat, Swarga Pavarga Dipatir Nakinchit, Yesham Kimusha Tarena Tesham, Akinchananam Mai Bhaktibhajam,
Matopyanantat parataparasmat
Matopyanantat parataparasmat
Vargapavargadipatena kinchit
Svargapavargadipatena kinchit
Yesham kim usyat itarena tesham
Yesham Kedushan Terena Tesham
Akinchananam mayi bhakti bhajam
Kinchananam Maribhaktivajam. There's no other name chanting for it.
Matopyanantat parataparasmat Vargapavargadipatena kinchit Yesham kim usyat itarena tesham Akinchananam mayi bhakti bhajam Matopyanantat parataparasmat Vargapavargadipatena kinchit Yesham kim usyat itarena tesham Akinchananam mayi bhakti bhajam
Mata, from me, happy, healing, Anantat,
Anantat,
unlimited in strength and opulence,
limited in strength and opulence.
Parataparasmat,
Parataparasmat,
higher than the highest,
higher than the highest.
Svarga, Pavarga, Adipate,
Svarga, Apavarga, Adipate,
able to bestow happiness obtainable by living in the heavenly kingdom,
able to bestow happiness obtainable by living in the heavenly kingdom,
by liberation, or by enjoyment of material comfort and then liberation.
or by enjoyment of material comfort and then liberation.
Na,
Not
not kinchit, anything. Yesham, of whom, kim, what need,
with need,
or syat,
Syat,
can there be,
can there be,
Itarena,
Vitarena,
with any other, Tesham, of them, Kinchananam, without needs or without possessions,
without needs or without possessions.
Mai,
Mai,
unto me,
unto me,
Bhakti Bhajam,
Bhakti Bhajam,
executing devotional service.
executing devotional service.
Translation: I am fully opulent, almighty and superior to Lord Brahma and Indra, the king of the heavenly planets, and also the bestower of all happiness obtained in the heavenly kingdom and by liberation. Nonetheless, the Brahmins do not seek material comforts from me. They are very pure and they do not want to possess anything. They simply engage in my devotional service. What is the need of their asking for material benefits from anyone else? Repeat. I'm fully opulent, almighty, and superior to Lord Brahma,
and superior to Lord Brahma,
and Indra, the king of the heavenly planets.
and Indra, the king of the heavenly planets.
I am also the bestower of all happiness,
I'm also the bestower of all happiness,
obtained in the heavenly kingdom,
in the heavenly kingdom,
and by liberation.
and by liberation.
Nonetheless, the Brahmins do not seek material comforts from me.
Nonetheless, the Brahmins do not seek material comforts from me.
They are very pure and do not want to possess anything.
They're very pure and do not want to possess anything.
They simply engage in my devotion service.
They simply engage in my devotional service.
What is the need of their asking for material benefits from anyone else?
Which is the need of their asking for material benefits from anyone else?
Srila Prabhupada's purport. The perfect Brahminical qualification is stated herein, Kinchananam Mani Bhakti Bhajana. The Brahmins are always engaged in devotional service of the Lord. Consequently, they have no material wants, nor do they possess material things. In Chaitanya Charitamrita 11.8, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the position of pure Vaishnavas who are anxious to return home back to Godhead. Niskinchanasya Bhagavat Bhajanon Kasya. Those who actually want to return back to Godhead are niskinchana, that is, they have no desire for material comfort. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advises Sandashanam Vishayinam Atayoshitam Cha Hanta Hanta Vishapashanato Pya Satu. Material opulence and sense gratification through the association of women are more dangerous than poison. Brahmins who are pure Vaishnavas always engaged in the Lord's service and are devoid of any desire for material gain. The Brahmins do not worship demigods like Lord Brahma, Indra or Lord Shiva for individual comfort. They do not even ask the Supreme Lord for material profit. Therefore, it is concluded that the Brahmins are the supreme living entities of this world. Srila Gurudev also confirms this in Srimad Bhagavatam. Tasman Maya Pitashesha Kriya Pratma Nirantara Maya Pitatmana Pumso Maya Sanyashta Karmana Napashyami Param Bhutam Kratu Samadarshanat. The Brahmins are always dedicated to Lord's service with their bodies, mind, words and mind. There is no better person than a Brahmin who thus engages himself and dedicates himself to the Supreme Lord. Om Gana Turanda Shya Ganajana Svakaya Chachumrutamina Tasma Shri Guru Namaha Nikam Kuruti Vajala Kamagati Garam Najivatam Vande Shri Guru Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srimati Gauravanita Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare. I am fully offered to Almighty and Superior Lord Brahma and Indra, the king of the heavenly planets, and all should bestow all happiness attending him in the heavenly kingdom and elevation. Nonetheless, the Brahmins do not seek material comforts from me. They are very pure and do not want to possess anything. Simply engage in my service. What is the need of their asking for material benefits from anyone else? In the Prana Samhita, Lord Brahma mentions that there's in the spiritual world these trees known as kalpavrikshas. Prabhupada explains that normally a tree can only produce the type of variety of fruits which it's able to. Like you get an orange tree, it won't produce apples. You get an apple tree, it won't produce oranges, etc. like that. Prabhupada says kalpavriksha tree can produce anything, produce any variety, any type, and any quantity. And he says that sometimes, because it says even though the devotees have no desire, because you think, well, if they're free from material desire, what's the need of having a kalpavriksha tree? Because if we think a kalpavriksha tree is on a platform, let's be ego, think, oh, that's great, let's go and get whatever we want from it. If we have some material desire, we were thinking that'd be a great thing. But they actually have no desire for themselves. But sometimes, Prabhupada says that because the devotees have some desire to fulfill in their devotional service, then they have desire for something they can offer to Krishna. That is their desire. So in this way, Prabhupada says that desire is never extinguished. That sometimes monists or voidists will say we have to become free from desire. But free from desire means free from material desire. Because the living entity, part of its nature is the desire. We cannot become desireless. And Prabhupada explains that the liberation, either in voidism or in personalism, that liberation is temporary. So he says that just as the astronauts sometimes they go into orbit, they go into outer space, and because they have no resting place, they have to once again come back to Earth. So similarly, the soul is liberated, either nirvana, free from material entanglement, and they can enter into the void, which is actually described as Mahatattva, the sum total material energy. or they can enter into the Brahman. Prabhupada likens this to spiritual suicide, that one is suffering so much that death seems like a relief. It seems like a release from that suffering. Sometimes people think, I'm suffering so much in this life, why bother living? Let's just go through one last piece of suffering and be done with it. But they don't realise that they don't die. That the death of the body only means more trouble, because you still have the desires and you have no body to fulfill, and then you have your karma, because the body is a gift we have achieved, and then we give it up. We have to suffer without the means of any kind of sense gratification whatsoever. And of course, that's another story altogether. So this likening the liberation of the soul into the void, Mahatma, or the impersonal Brahman, Prabhupada refers to it as the last snare of Maya. So Maya has got many traps, and the last trap is, okay, finally you can just perform all these austerities and merge into the oneness of all source of existence, and then there's a good philosophy to go with it. And it's such a good philosophy because Lord Shiva propounds it as Sankaracharya. And some people don't know this, as Prabhupada mentions, due to a poor fund of knowledge. And the Mayavadis, impersonalists, don't realise that the very person who is teaching this Prabhupada calls it covered atheism, is actually Lord Shiva, who is Vaishnava, Vitan Shambhu, the topmost Vaishnava. And this was also foretold that in Kali Yuga, Lord Shiva told Parvati that he would appear in Kali Yuga in the dress of a Brahmin to teach covered atheism to the deluded atheists. So, as we know, previously people were using Vedic concession for killing animals. And the concession was that if someone at all costs was hell-bent, which is quite a good term actually, hell-bent, on eating meat, then they were allowed to take an animal on a full moon night, but it was called that a certain animal you were never allowed to take a cow. Certain animals you were allowed to take, and they would cut its throat, they would kill it, and they would whisper into its ear as they're killing it, I'm killing you now, but in the future you will kill me. And the purpose of this is that the person will start to think, well, why am I killing? Because they're killing it anyway. So this way, at least the Vedas are trying to awaken their consciousness to that I'm going to have to suffer for this. But then what happened is, they used this mantra, just opening wholesale slaughterhouses, and you see nowadays it's such a degraded situation. This Naradama civilization. So the word Narada, as in Narada Muni, he's topmost human being, but the other word, the pronunciation of Naradama, means the lowest among mankind, Narada meaning mankind, including both men and women. So the lowest of mankind is that they have all material infrastructure, all material facilities, education, medicine, all these things, but they're performing abominable activities such as animal slaughter. They're using their intelligence simply make better weapons for killing each other, for killing children in the womb, for animal slaughter. So this is a misuse of their intelligence. So therefore, this Lord Buddha came and taught them, stop killing the animals. He was teaching them compassion. This is the first principle he taught, was ahimsa. So anyone who claims to be a follower of Lord Buddha must be following this principle of ahimsa, non-violence, or natihimsa, minimal violence. So which means that we don't support animal slaughter in any way. So this was the actual teaching, and if one wants to follow it properly, then we have to do that. In fact, in all religions this is being taught. There was a devotee called Satyaraj who wrote a book about vegetarianism in different religions, and you can find every scripture is there. In fact, actually in Israel, Nowadays, many of the traditional followers of Judaism, they're finding that the only true practice of kosher, this is what some of them say, the only true practice of kosher is to become vegetarian or vegan. So therefore there's actually quite a lot of vegan restaurants in Israel. So hopefully this will expand throughout that faith, and if all faiths, Prabhupada said, if everyone just stops at the slaughter of animals, then even the weather will get better. So such a prophetic statement. There was this US leader, Al Gore, who wrote a book about, who actually did the film, I believe it was, about global warming. And there's other presentations made similarly. And they're discovering how the mass production of the meat industry is a very big contributor to global warming. So this is something Prabhupada says just simply off the cuff. Stop the animal slaughter, even the weather will get better. So we can see that Prabhupada is actually, sometimes we say this, maybe we should treat Prana quite casually, but this is the glory of Prabhupada. By a statement, you can say with Prana, people listen to him. And Prabhupada also says that anything good which is going on as a result of the Sankirtan movement, so simply by the chanting of the holy name, then all auspiciousness will start to emerge. So therefore our prime duty is to chant the holy name and to spread the chanting of the holy name, to encourage others to chant. And there's no limit to how we can chant. It's not that we chant, okay, we've done this amount, if I chant any more than 16 rounds or chant any more than 2 rounds, it's going to do me some harm. We can chant all the time. Prabhupada says to initiated disciples, he said minimum 16 on the beads and unlimited off the beads. So we can be chanting all the time. Satatam, Kirtayantavam, always chant my name, or chant my glory, as Krishna says. Trinadapishinajina, Kirtaniya Sadahari. So if we develop the mood of the devotee, then we can always be chanting. So it's not that the chanting gets in the way of things. Sometimes I heard one devotee once say, he was chanting his rounds quite furiously. He says, so it sounds like you're chanting, trying to chase the holy name away. He says, I just want to get my rounds out of the way. And I says, well, so what are they in the way of? Surely the holy name is meant to clear the path. It's not that the holy name is in the way of things, it means that we have some other desire. So Krishna consciousness is not in the way unless we want something else. So here in the purport, Prabhupada refers to that those who actually want to return back to Godhead are niskinchana, they have no desire for material comfort. So there's two things here. One is that he's saying that we should, if we want to go back home to Godhead, then don't be seeking comfort in the material world. And Srila Thakur, he confirms this. He says they give up all sense of self-comforting, because this, of course, we have to maintain our body and we can't just be falsely austere. Prabhupada was also giving a balance there that sometimes devotees perform austerities unnecessarily, and Prabhupada, he wasn't impressed. He said, well, why don't they put the lasso on the shoe if they want to perform some austerities? So he wasn't keen on austerities just for the sake of being austere. It's not that you have to shave your face, so let's just dig in and cut the face a little bit so it makes things a bit more difficult. Or it's snowing today, so let's not wear any shoes. And that doesn't please Krishna. This is austerity mode of ignorance. This is mentioned that it's actually it's not pleasing to Krishna. So false austerity, we have to be clear what false austerity is. And true austerity means that we undertake some difficulty in the course of our service. But sometimes in the course of our service, there's no difficulty. There's actually nectar, it's blissful. And at other times, it may be some difficulty. So when the difficulty is there, that means that we have to muster up some devotion. We have to sometimes we find ourselves, because this movement is growing faster than we can keep up with, and we have to be jumping in a deep end, going into uncharted depths at times. Just like just now, Raghunath is spending a lot of time looking into grants, not something that he did a few months ago, but he's jumped in the deep end and he's learning. and then some good results are coming. So this happens, and sometimes we get given a service, we know nothing about it, and then we have to remember that Krishna is the ability. And Krishna will give us, if we depend on Krishna, this is the test, can we depend on Krishna? So if we're depending on Krishna, that's the main thing. It doesn't matter whether the result is there or whether the result is not there. What is the result? The result is to depend on Krishna. That's what Krishna is looking for, because in the end of it all, what is this material world? It's, according to Krishna, it's hardly even there. It's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that this whole material cosmic manifestation rests on the hoods of an antidave, and it's almost like a mustard seed. So a mustard seed that's so small you can hardly even weigh it. If there's a mustard seed on your head, Prabhupada says, you would not even know it's there. So similarly, an antishesh, who's a portion of the Plymouth portion, etc. So then this is the whole material cosmic manifestation. So what does it matter, if we do on Sankirtan, we do 10 books or 100 books? It doesn't really matter in one sense, or if you collect a certain amount of money or a certain amount, another amount of money. But it's our endeavour which is important. Krishna, he's looking to see the soul struggling to get out of the entrapment of material entanglement, and they're trying to take shelter in me. They're trying to take shelter in difficult situations, and this is very attractive to Krishna. So this is mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, that although Krishna, the name Krishna itself means all attractive, that Krishna is actually attracted by the devotee. And especially if the devotee is trying to get free from material entanglement and trying to take shelter in Krishna. So in this way, we should never give up the association of devotees. Mother Yamuna once gave a class when we were back then, and she was saying that whatever difficulty you undergo, then just don't give up the association of devotees, and then you'll always come through. So as I say, a battered winner is better than a comfortable loser. So one might think, oh, this is too troublesome, let me get up and we'll just jump overboard. We get a bit seasick on the boat and we think, this boat is causing me to be sick, let me get off it. When the material energy is causing the sickness, the boat is saving us from further sickness. So stay on the boat, and this way we're sure to get back home to Godhead. So staying on the boat means that we continue taking prasadam, offering our food, whether we're living in the temple or whether we're living outside the temple. Make sure that all the food that we digest or ingest is offerable to Krishna and is offered to Krishna. Try to make a nice devotional offering. We don't have to know millions of mantras or even be a Brahmin to offer to Krishna. You can offer Krishna with devotion, says Bhakti-Alam. If we offer with love and devotion, then Ashnami Pratatmana, I accept it. And Prabhupada says in the purport that when personally says that God has no hands, he has no mouth, so how can he eat? And Prabhupada says, well, Krishna says, offer it to me, I accept it. So who do we believe, Krishna or some rascal? So it's Prabhupada's point. If we offer it to Krishna, we chant Krishna's name, we engage all our mind and our senses in Krishna's service as much as we possibly can, and at the same time carrying out our duties in life. And ultimately the basis of the devotees, the pure Vaishnavas, is to accept anything which is favourable for Krishna consciousness, anything which is favourable for advancing in devotional service, and to reject anything which is unfavourable. So if we come across a situation where we're not sure, then we can ask ourselves, is this going to be favourable, is it going to be unfavourable? And then if we don't know, then we ask someone else. If we don't have the complete understanding to determine whether something should or shouldn't be done, then we can ask another devotee who we think may be able to tell us. So this word is kinchana, or sometimes akinchana. It means without material desire. So the desire of the devotee is linked with the Supreme Lord's desire. And even sometimes the devotees, they want to please the Lord so much, when the Lord says, okay, don't mix with common people because you'll become, you may take the risk of becoming contaminated. And Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavatam, in one of the purports, it says that the devotees of the Lord, knowing the mood of the Lord, they undertake all sorts of risks in order to deliver people to Krishna, or to bring Krishna consciousness to the fallen conditioned souls. And this is also in response to trying to repay the debt of the spiritual master and to fulfill the order of the spiritual master. So in the material world, generally they try to accumulate as much as they possibly can. It's interesting to say the human race, it's almost like the race is to see, see who can accumulate the most toys. Because that's really what it is, it's just a manifestation of material energy. So a child may have some toy truck, a toy car, a toy doll, toy house, and then the adults, they have the bigger version of the same thing, and they just become similarly enamored and illusioned into thinking that there's some happiness to be experienced here. So people spend their whole lives working hard to accumulate some wealth, which generally they don't even get to enjoy it for themselves. It takes so long to accumulate it. Like, unfortunately, we're looking for material security. And obviously, if we're a family person, we have to provide some security for the family, which means we have to be quite selfless anyway, because as we're paying our mortgage, we're not going to be able to enjoy it. It's the children who will get the enjoyment of it. And of course, if there's multiple children, then they're not all going to be able to enjoy it as one person. And another thing is that no matter how much you accumulate, there's people who are very expert at moving your wealth. No matter how much you try to protect it, there's people who are very expert at detecting the whereabouts of valuable things, and they'll steal it. So either they'll break into your house. So typically a robber would think, okay, there's a big fence around this house and there's nice cars, that means there's money in there. Unfortunately today, even robbers are so many robbers and so many thieves that they'll break into even a poor man's house. Just like the other day, I was speaking with my mother, and she said so she was born in 35, when she grew up in the 30s and 40s and 50s, she said everybody was so poor that nobody would break into your house. You didn't even have to lock the door, there was nothing to steal. She said that if somebody did break into your house, then they were likely to get lynched, because that was considered really, really low class, that if you steal from people who have practically nothing, then there's something far wrong with you. But nowadays people have so much affluence, there's something to steal in almost every house. And this causes so much distress that even the people who are not very well off, they struggle just to get some basic necessities in life and some basic methods for entertainment, and then someone breaks into their house and steals their things and puts them under stress. Or someone is very affluent and they get more money, and then the government wants to take more off of them. The harder they work, as soon as they get to a certain level, so it seems like there's a certain kind of level that keeps people in the poverty level. Otherwise, many more people will be wealthy, so you get to a certain stage and there's more taxation. So it's not very easy to get ahead in life. There's so much endeavour, so much pressure, and at the end of it all, you can't take it with you. So Prabhupada says that people are very expert at detecting your wealth and removing it from you. And of course, wealth in the material world, it's just like it's considered by Bhagavatam saying objects of false prestige. We think if we get a certain make of car, a house in a certain neighbourhood, of course, the neighbourhood maybe we're looking for a bit more peace, but there's no guarantee. Wherever you move to, you might get a nasty neighbour. You might think, okay, we've seen our dream house, let's go and buy it. You buy the dream house and you get a neighbour from hell next door. So this is the mercy of the material energy, that we cannot rest, we cannot find any peace in the material world. Even if we do, then it's not permanent. So Prabhupada likens the living entities enjoying, we're in this material world because we wanted to be here. This material world is here because we wanted, just like one of the devotees asked Prabhupada, well, why did Krishna create this world? Why did he put us in it? He says, because you wanted it. Krishna didn't want you to go. Just like this Dev Jago song, Bhagavatam Thakur's, he's taking the position of the Lord's mentality, saying, you've come into this world saying that you would remember me, but having forgotten me, you've remained in great ignorance. So according to this, believe Krishna's service, also as mentioned in the Bhagavatam, Maharaj Yudhishthira asks, why is it the living entity gave up his service in the spiritual world? So we thought we'd come and enjoy, what it's like to be Krishna. Cool, there you go into your world. This is what you want, this is what it's like. You can try and be an enjoyer, but just like you know, there's an unlimited number of other living entities who will also want to be the enjoyer. So you're going to compete with each other, and this is called the rat race. So the human race, the race that nobody wins, as they say. So this human form of life is meant for self-realization, and any other use of it actually is failure. So the living entities come into the material world and they try to enjoy, just like Krishna. They want to be the enjoyer. So actually all the living entities are Prakriti or female, and Krishna is Purusha. And when we realize that we're Prakriti, which means we're subordinate to Krishna, then we can become happy. But because we want to be Purusha, then we want to be the enjoyer, we want to be the controller. And this is just likened to children. Sometimes they imitate the mother cooking, and they get mud and they make some mud pies and pretend they're eating it, and they make some invisible cups of tea, things like that, and share it amongst their little friends on McDonald's. And the parents don't really take them very seriously. They think, this is not really enjoyment, it's pretend. So similarly, the living entities, they try to pretend to be Krishna in the pure world, and therefore Krishna doesn't take them very seriously in that sense. But when they want to give up that play and then return to the spiritual world, then Krishna makes all facility for them. So these material desires, they're like rivers flowing into the ocean, incessant. The rivers are always flowing in. Sometimes they're flowing in big time, and sometimes it's just a trickle, depending on the rainfall. And the rivers are never going to run dry, because they go into the ocean, the sun evaporates into clouds move, sit on the mountain, and then the rain comes, or goes into snow, just like when the snow from the mountains melts, then the rivers start to burst their banks. So sometimes we're being afflicted by small desires, and sometimes big desires where it seems like a tidal wave of desire. But no amount of satisfying these desires is actually going to stop them. And just like the example was given, you put fat on fire, or oil on fire, it douses it momentarily, and then it flares up and it keeps it going. This is why people put oil on the fire, to keep the fire going. So to think that we can fulfill desires and will go away is foolish because it adds more fuel to the fire, and we keep on watering that seed of desire. But if you water the seed of desire of service to Krishna, then that is the kinchana or niskinchana, to become desireless means we have no personal desire. So this is the challenge, is how to align our desires with Krishna's desires. And if we can do that, then we can become peaceful. That's true desirelessness. And so attaining, sometimes people worship demigods to fulfill material desires, and that can be done. Or sometimes people try to fulfill the desires of men, other bosses, be very good at work so that they can give them some promotion, higher salary, things like that. So we can make our lot a bit better in life, and that's natural, because living it together we want to suffer, so we're trying to avoid suffering this way. But the real way to avoid suffering is to get out of the material world once and for all, not to take birth in the material world again. As long as we have a body, then we have to go through the Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi, birth, death, old age and disease. So, human society or demigod society bestowing gifts or small benedictions upon living entities is a bit like the prison guards bestowing favours upon the inmates. They're still incarcerated, they're not free, but they might get an extra, say, couple of cigarettes, or they might get an extra candy bar or something like that, but they're still within the prison. And the prison guard doesn't have the authority to grant pardon, only the governor or head of state can do that. So similarly, if we approach Krishna, if we satisfy Krishna, then we can be liberated from the prisoners of the material world. So also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's mentioned that a living entity aspires for impersonal liberation, which is millions of times greater than any sense pleasure in the material world. And then Lord Chaitanya says that devotional services are unlimitedly more blissful than impersonal liberation. So therefore he's saying that if you think relief from all material distresses by merging is something worth attaining, then devotional services gives you much, much more than that, and it's actually more easily attainable. The path of bhakti is easier because simply we have to learn how to dovetail everything in Krishna's service, and then that purifies our mind and senses, and we become automatically attracted to Krishna in due course of time, and we become reconstituted in our eternal occupation, our eternal position. And only devotional service can do that. Neither the path of Jnani nor Karma can do that, only Bhakti can do that. So we'll just stop there. Anyone got any questions? Nothing online? Okay. Srimad ki Jai, Prabhupada ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Hari Bol, Prabhupada ki